So the important thing is based on right now, the next target is 12,000, but I think it's important. And again, I want to show you a couple things of why I think it's a bottom. So we're going to turn over to the Absolutely. So amazing, right? I mean, we've seen such a collapse from the 65-ish thousand when we were doing that live interview in Dubai, which was just awesome. I still remember I was the loneliest man in the room. No one really wanted to talk to me too much there. I kind of had to stand in the corner because I was the only one that was bearish. But again, price is always king. Charts are always truth versus emotion. And I think we always have to remember that whether you're a bull or a bear, price and price charts are what's going to give you the clearest signal. So we saw the break of 20,000 just this past, really this past weekend. And the key here is to understand why it broke 20,000, because there were a lot of people saying, hey, 20,000 is the low, and by the way, they all came on once we got to like 30, they all piled on the bandwagon. But the bottom line is when you have everyone calling for a low of 20, you have a lot of people putting stops just under 20. And it's the tendency of a market to run those stops, make people freak out, make the weak hands exit, and then you finally get a short-term bottom. And I think that's what we have here on Bitcoin. And again, I want to show you a couple things of why I think it's a bottom. So we're going to turn over to the charts here. And what you could see here is that we had this collapse from about 40,000 down to about 26 or so, 25 and 26. That move down of 14,000, it's about $14,000, was replicated perfectly with a measured move down to about 17,500. So that's a measured move. That gives you a good basis for a low. In addition, if we take a look, we know that the January or the December 2017 high, that was a major level. We have now recaptured it after just piercing it briefly. So we know that support. And then even one more little tidbit of great technical analysis is that if you take the low from March of 2020, which is the low from COVID, which was the lowest point going back to quite a while on Bitcoin, it was around $4,000. And if you connect it to this recent low and you drag a parallel line up, you get the two highs from last April as well as November. So there's a confluence of technical supports right here that signal to me, at least we have a bounce here, probably to 25 to 30,000 in the cards. It'll be faster. I think as we get and stay above 20,000, a lot more people are going to start to say, hey, we have a major low in Bitcoin, and you're going to see the bulls come back with a vengeance, trying to say, okay, now we're going to start heading back up to all-time highs. I think that'll propel it over the next probably 3 to 6 weeks back to 25 to 30,000, which again, from 17,000 is a low, or 17.5 percentage-wise, that's massive. Now, if you're in from 60 or 65, that doesn't seem such a good bounce. But again, in percentage terms, that's a major, major move. Now, once we get there, unfortunately, I still see more downside. I still think that we will likely head down to probably about 12,000, which is my second price target on the downside. So I think it's important to recognize that I remain a long-term bull on Bitcoin. In fact, when we broke 20,000 at 19, I announced that I started my beginning hodl position. And so ever since we were at 65,000, even though I was bearish, I was always saying, hey, listen, long-term, I think there's a huge place in the economy, in the world for Bitcoin. And I think we'll get there. We'll get to 100,000, 500, maybe $1 million. It's just, you have to flush out all the weak nonsense. I think last time we talked about that Darwinian concept of only the strongest will survive. And you just have so much crap in the system, frankly, right? So the idea here is that in the near term, a bounce back to 25 or 30, the reason 25 is a key level is that is your low from the Terra Luna collapse. So that is going to be resistance. And then if you go up, there was a ton of consolidation for about a month that occurred just around 30,000, and that is going to be major resistance. So it's hard for me to imagine with the NASDAQ, even though I expect bounces there, I still think the NASDAQ's headed a lot lower, at least to the COVID highs, that the Bitcoin market would bottom just yet fully. So I still think we need to wash out more of the weak-handed Bitcoin, the cryptos, and that will finally give us later this year a big point bottom.
All right.
2 to 3 years out, I think we're back to 65. So I do think there's a decent chance that we're back to 65 within 2 or 3 years. I think this next 6 months or so is going to be the hardest then we'll bottom out, and then you'll probably have another 6 months of sideways chop. If we look at past cycles on Bitcoin, it's usually that first year down, and then you get a sideways kind of choppy where the bulls and the bears are just battling it out for a period of time. And then finally you start to get that move up. And I'm still a believer that inflation is going to be a systemic problem, maybe not at 8 or 9%, but at 5%. And I still believe that when the economy really tumbles here, and I'm starting to see the signals of that eventually the Fed will say, okay, we have 5% or 4% inflation, but we have 10% unemployment. We now need to print again, which is going to be another positive for Bitcoin. So again, there longer term, lots of positives for Bitcoin. I don't think it's going away. I don't think it's going to zero ever, but ultimately you just have to weather the storm essentially.
Well,
I don't think the S&P or the NASDAQ are going to hit new all-time highs for years. I think we could be in a scenario like the NASDAQ was in 2000, where when you finally dumped out, it took about 15 years to make new all-time highs. But I think Bitcoin will get there a lot sooner because it's not an economic play, right? So if the economy is suffering, if you have this systemic kind of bear market longer period, that's bad for stocks. But Bitcoin, because the printing presses will start up again, that would be ultimately a bullish scenario for Bitcoin.
Okay.
So the important thing is, based on right now, the next target is 12,000. But I think it's important to recognize that it's very possible we go below 10,000. All right. One thing I've learned in my trading career of stocks and commodities and now crypto is that assets go much further to the upside than anyone thinks and much further to the downside. I would say that you would prefer not to see the lows from 2018 and 19 taken out, which were around 3,500. Aside from that, this new unprecedented environment for crypto, because of the Fed and what they're doing, and they're pulling out money and sucking it out of the system, you have to expect that it could be a very rocky ride. So just to give you a sense of how I'm playing this, I started a HODL position at 19,000, just a small amount. I basically said to myself, what do I want to invest in Bitcoin over the longer term to just buy and hold? And I came up with a number and I divided it in 6 parts. And I took that first sixth amount of money and I bought at 19. And I'm going to basically put a buy level of that amount, 1/6 every 3,000 down. And so I'm looking at even potentially having some still buyable money even below 12,000, because I recognize from my history of trading that it can easily go below my lowest point. So I'm at a dollar cost average now, starting from 19, 16, 13, 10, and so forth, all the way down.
That answers
another great point. And we saw this with GameStop. We saw this with AMC when Wall Street Bets kind of did their runs and really bankrupted a couple hedge funds as well. Is that in general, when you know that there's big institutional money that's going to be forced and that it's leveraged at certain levels, then the market is just naturally drawn to those levels to put maximum pressure. So for instance, I had heard that 20 to 21,000 was a key level for Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy's holding. Now I'm hearing that they came out and said, no, we can weather the storm lower and so forth, which is fine. But the key is you have to see more kind of big money that's leveraged kind of getting blown up. And you also have to see, again, I'm in the camp that 90 to 95% of all altcoins need to go to zero. And again, for that to happen, it makes a lot of sense that Bitcoin's going to have to go down lower than this, 17,500 level at this point to 12, maybe even below, before you wash out those kind of nonsense junk coins.
I guess that's it for today, guys. If you found this video useful, then don't forget to like the video and share this knowledge with your friends and family. And don't forget to check out the full video, link is in the description. Thank you.